Hello and welcome along to Penwith Radio. I'm Rob Jenkins and this is Lasting Memories, part of the All Our Stories project in association with the Heritage Lottery Fund.
In this edition of Lasting Memories, we take a look at Lamorna Bakery with David Eddy. Then it's a summer in February, before we take to surfing at Sennen, and we finish off with a little Wildfood walk with Rachel Lambert.
I'm Sally Peterson reporting for Penwith Radio. I spoke to David Eddy, whose parents and family used to run a bakery in Newlyn. We went through a variety of objects that mean a lot to him because of their history. Here he tells us about them.
We've got quite a lot of historical artefacts from the bakery here, going back to the days of sort of wood and metal. So we've got this object. Looks like a medieval torture device. If you imagine a paint roller, but with a wooden drum instead of a sponge, and it's got nails sticking out of it. Loads of people are always fascinating what it is and what it was used for. It would be run over a huge sheet of pastry to put holes in the pastry to stop it rising. They're still produced today, but obviously sort of plastic now. But this just looks so wonderful with the metal and the wood. The bakery was started in 1918 by my great-grandfather, and at the end of the First World War, somehow or other, he had his hands on an old used shell cartridge, and so it was cut down at the base and sharpened a little, and it's made a pastry cutter, and you can make discs of pastry by pressing out on this. And it's a lovely sort of thought that only a few sort of months or years previous to it being used in the bakery, it was used for the First World War and military purposes, and then it was turned and recycled in a really ingenious way into something much nicer. I've never seen another one, and it's very, very sort of heavy gauge metal as well compared to pastry cutters you usually get. So I imagine after a few hours cutting out with it, you'd probably be a little worn out. But it's a beautiful object, you know, especially when it's polished up, and it's a real keepsake because it literally goes back to my great-grandfather's day.
David Eddy and his baking equipment.
It does look like a mould to make a brain, doesn't it? But if you think about a vegetable, it looks like a brain. It's actually to mould a cake in the shape of a cauliflower. Sounds bizarre. They were very popular back several generations ago. Why cauliflower and cabbage? I'm not sure, but if you had a little sponge cake, as you can see, now this is almost like the opposite relief of the top of a cauliflower, the white bit. So you would fill that with a white marzipan for the topping and turn it upside down, and it would make the impressions of the flowers of the cauliflower, or whatever you call them. This other little mould or plate, horseshoe shaped, goes with it, and it actually makes the cauliflower leaves to go around the side of the cake. So you'd have this little celebration cake in the perfect shape of a cauliflower. I didn't know what these were for. I saw them in the bakery for years, and I never really placed them together or what they could be until I saw an old book by Renshaw's, the marzipan manufacturer, and on page 66 there was the picture of this cauliflower cake, and it all just fell into place. I actually took these plates and moulds and reconstructed the cake, and it was a perfect copy of what was in the book. However, the book that was in was dated 1951, so it would tie in with, you know, perhaps the trend for strange objects. You know, also in the book there were sort of marzipan fruits and marzipan little animals and things. So I think it was a novelty just to have something different, but I can't imagine anyone being particularly pleased to have a cake in the shape of a cauliflower for their birthday or something. This is an interesting object. Just looks like a bit of a stick, actually, but there is a story to it. If I turn it that way, you can just see the remains of WLYN from Newlyn. And basically, we used to have 18-inch by 30-inch wooden bread trays to carry bread, buns, you know, for deliveries. Well, eventually these would wear down and wear away on the corners, and so they would be cut in half, and then the half of the tray would be used to carry bread from the bakery, from the ovens, up to the shop. Well, when they wore away, you were left with the sort of wooden sides, and they would be formed and shaped. And this is actually a jam stirrer. And we would use this to stir the boiling jam, almost like a wooden spoon. But when this wore away, we would actually form it into almost like a little fat chopstick to work the donuts in the boiling oil. So it was recycling at its sort of purest form, really, and oldest way. You know, nothing was ever thrown away, and it was a real make do amend. But they worked incredibly well. Here I have a little invoice book for J.H. Tonkin, which was a merchant in Penzance, and this was just in amongst all the books upstairs in the office. And I started looking at it, and the dates and the goods inside were amazingly old, and they were 1920 and things like that. And I just looked inside the back cover, and the date of printing for the little book was June 1917. So it really ties in with the first sort of days of the bakery, and I can just envisage my great-grandfather going out to somewhere in Penzance and buying this little book, you know, wondering what was going to be put in it and how his bakery was going to do. My grandfather had a Model T Ford delivery van, and we were wondering if it was paying Ford, but unfortunately the Model T Ford delivery van met its end in a hedge near St Buryan not long after we had it. So I think we may have reverted back to the good old horse and cart setup after that for a few years. J.H. Tonkins, as far as I know, were a merchant where you could buy all sorts of sundries and items. It would be like us going to a supermarket now to buy our foodstuffs and all. So I think it was basically just a broad umbrella of what we may have bought that week. I've got very strong memories of the bakery. Obviously, I remember it. There's some of my very first memories. I can remember going in there as a very small child and making little jam pasties to bring home, and little animals made out of marzipan. As a youngster in Newlyn, I could always smell early in the morning, if we were in the harbour fishing, you could come up Jack Lane or up through the Ope, and you could wonderful smell of baking and of saffron buns and donuts. And I imagine many people in Newlyn sort of grew up to the smell of saffron wafting across the village and the harbour. They were lovely memories. I remember starting there, you know, early mornings. You'd get there on a horrible winter's morning, and it'd be dark and raining, and it would be absolutely freezing. That's probably one of the strongest memories, the contrasts in temperature. In August it was unbearably hot and obviously very frantic working, and hard working conditions. In the winter you would get there, and until the ovens warmed up and until you got going, you know, it really would be shiveringly cold. The first baker would get there at 4 usually and start the doughs off, start the mixing. Most of the flour and ingredients would be weighed out the night before, so you would literally add the water and start your first dough off, which was the white dough, the main dough for most of the breads. Other bakers would then come in as needed, most at 5:30. Of course, if it was very busy, Christmas Eve, August, you could work right through and start any time of the day or night. I've started at 10 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. awful times. There's one saying that the bakers, the older bakers in Newlyn used to say at sort of 3-4 o'clock in the morning was only good for bakers and rats, they used to say. That's all you see out at this time of the morning, boy. Bakers and rats. In the 1930s, the French sailors used to sort of frequent Newlyn in their crabbers very regularly. And they came to the bakery and asked for a very specific type of loaf to be made for them. In their broken English, they would say, "Manchez, manchez." And my grandfather and great-grandfather in those days would produce a huge round loaf for them, about 4 pounds in weight. And the sailors, you know, insisted on them being baked almost black so that they could survive the return journey to Brittany or another fishing trip. These proved really quite popular, and they evolved into the mansion loaves that we sold in the bakery. These, obviously, we made them smaller, 1 or 2 pounds, and they were like a little ball of dough, and you would mould them. And instead of putting the dough smooth side up, you'd put it on a baking tray rough side up, dust it with flour, and it would rise up really beautifully crusty. And they were unique to our bakery. Here we've got a tiny little mould. It's made for jams and jellies. It's a little copper mould with a little strawberry in relief on top. We had a couple of these, and you could put frangipan type sponge in it to make little almost petit fours, or mousse, or jelly, or even chocolates. It's only, I suppose, about 3 or 4 centimetres in diameter. So it's quite a tiny little mould. It's about the smallest we've ever seen. You usually see them on people's walls, you know, the shape of a salmon or something much bigger. It's not Newlyn copper, I wish it was. But we do have one thing that's related to the copper industry and the Newlyn industrial class. And it's stamped, it was just a sheet of steel, and it was stamped Best Wishes. And they said in the bakery that it did come from the same source as the stencils for the pilchard barrels. And basically you would put it over the top of a cake and dust it with icing sugar or things like that. So there's a Newlyn industrial class Best Wishes. I found 2 wooden blocks, each with a number on the end, so whether they came from a set of lots of blocks. We only ever found 2 in the bakery, and they're little moulds of birds. There's like 2 little birds facing each other, beautifully intricately carved. And you would use them to press icing sugar in to make little moulds for wedding cakes. So you'd have 2 little doves on your wedding cake or something like that. And they're beautiful, you know, almost one-offs. They've been hand-carved with great skill. There's great detail in them. Very beautiful little objects. My grandmother, as a young girl, lived in Hollydale in Lamorna, and she had this huge shock of wavy golden hair, and it really captivated the artists of the Lamorna Valley and the Newlyn School. So she would sit for them, and she sat for Dorothea Sharp and Charles and Ella Napper, and Dame Laura Knight in particular really liked painting her, and she's in some sort of quite famous paintings. There's one in a gallery somewhere of her by Dorothea Sharp on horseback as a young girl. I've yet to see it, but that's the family rumour anyway. But in our lounge, pride of place, on one of the walls is a beautiful line and ink drawing of my grandmother as a daughter by Dame Laura Knight. So I really, really love that. And that ties in with the bakery, because my grandfather used to have a delivery round, and he used to deliver to Hollydale Farm, and that's how they met. My grandmother was called Lily or Elizabeth Lily Pollard, and we think she's in quite a few of the paintings, but we can't sort of pin down which ones. I know my grandmother always sort of said to my parents how she remembers being in the gardens of the Nappers, and Charles Napper just burning piles of paintings. You know, she distinctly remembered a bonfire, and he'd throw a painting on it. But they're quite a close sort of relationship there. You know, they were sort of quite friendly, and this painting's a real treasure. I've got to admit it's a print, because my mother's got the original. There's only 3 prints. My sister's got one, I've got one, and there's one in Penley House Museum. It's such simple artwork, the strokes of the pen and the brush, yet it's so lifelike. It's amazing. I love it.
David Eddy from Newlyn in West Cornwall. And of course, Laura Knight is one of the Newlyn artists, and as such is ever present in the history of this area of Cornwall. Not least in the film that came out in 2013 called Summer in February, which featured a love triangle set in an artist colony in Lamorna at the turn of the 20th century, when Alfred Munnings was living down at the Lamorna Cove Hotel, with Emily Browning playing one of the main roles, Florence Carter Wood, Dominic Cooper playing Alfred Munnings, and Dan Stevens playing Gilbert Evans, the land agent at the time, who used to organise all the artist studios for the various artists living in the area. It's a sad and tragic love story, but proved a wonderful showcase for the landscape of West Cornwall. I caught up with David Evans, one of the people who actually sparked off the film, because he discovered his father's diaries in the attic of his house in Lamorna, and the diaries led to the revelation of the love triangle. Well, David was down at Penley House in Penzance giving a talk about the Newlyn artists when I spoke to him. David, you're here tonight to give a talk at Penley House on Laura Night and Harold Night. Welcome back to the area. And I was just wondering if you've always had a great interest in the Newlyn School of Artists, or is this something you've developed fairly recently?
I think really I grew up with a collection of my father's pictures, and I took it for granted, I think, at the time. But now, I suppose it started really with the first Newlyn exhibitions in about 1977, I think it was the first one here. I really got interested in it, and I started reading up a lot about it. Then in 85 there was another exhibition which went up to the Barbican in London and up to Birmingham, and we lent a few pictures to that, and I really got interested then. And at that time a little society in Sevenoaks, where I live, asked if I could do a little talk for them. So I sort of scrambled around and got a few slides together, and it built up from there really. And by 2000, when I was about to retire from my agricultural work, I thought, well, I'd like to get onto the NADFAS directory, so that's what happened then. And yes, I built up an interest in it, but I'm learning all the time, and that's what goes. You know, I'll learn some things this evening from local people who know things about the Knights, which I probably don't.
And of course, you're coming back later in the year to give a NADFAS talk, aren't you?
I'm coming back, yes, in September to do a talk for the new Penzance NADFAS on the life and work of Alfred Munnings, and that's another thing I've studied in some detail over the years, and I'm looking forward to doing that as well.
Well, of course, there's been a lot of talk this year about the filming of Summer in February. If it hadn't been for you going up into the attic and finding your father's diaries, this film wouldn't be happening, would it?
I suppose not. It really happened quite sort of gradually. What happened to start with, some friends came to have dinner with us, and we showed them the painting that Alfred Munnings had left for my father of Florence going through the Lamorna Valley. And this chap was the head of the art department at Tunbridge School, and he said one of my colleagues, the head of English, this is his period, and I'm sure he'd be interested in this with the possibility of writing a historical novel. So we met Jonathan Smith, who wrote the novel, and he said, I'd love to pick it up and take it forward. So that's where it started. And there was a sort of Tunbridge School network which was going around the thing, because Jonathan Smith taught Jeremy Cowdrey, who became the producer, one of the producers, and he also taught Dan Stevens. And after the novel had come out, the three of them got together and they thought, we must make this into a film. Well, of course, it was simmering for a number of years and suddenly came to fruition last November when they got the thing going. And, of course, the filming, a lot of people down here will know about, took place in January and the early part of February.
You said that you feel Dan has probably portrayed your father very sensitively. Did you feel that Emily was right for the part of Florence?
Well, yes. I mean, Emily was flown over from midsummer in New Zealand to sort of -5 degrees here, because although they had a lot of wonderful weather during the time, I mean, it was sun, there was quite a lot of sun, it was bitterly cold.
It was bitterly cold. I went to the filming on Holywell Beach, and it was freezing.
Yes, well, I'd love to have seen that, actually, the race between Alfred Munnings and my father, yes. And I think the producers and the directors were so pleased with the parts, the people who played the parts. They all got on extraordinarily well, apparently, which is not always the case, I gather, when films are being made.
Yes, they did seem to get on very well from what I saw of them in Lamorna, and they all seemed very sad to be leaving, saying they'd had a wonderful time. I think they were in a bit of a bubble, all living together in one place and working on the project in the way that they had. You were mentioning a moment ago that you found it quite emotional when you saw Dan and Emily.
I thought, golly, that's my father, you know, it's an extraordinary feeling that, yes, that there was somebody playing this part. Yes, I mean it was, but it was lovely to see it, and I mean to see the professionalism of the whole thing. It was quite amazing. You know, they do retake until the director feels he's got it absolutely right. And one thing that actually the producers said to me, that the key person in the whole thing is a photographer, and the photographers, because I mean there are people shooting from different angles. You know, that really is tantamount to getting a really successful film. Yes.
Yes, well, it did look very beautiful, and I think to film in Cornwall in January was very brave of them as well, because it could have gone horribly wrong. They were so lucky that the weather was bright. And for you, what an extraordinary experience to see your father's life coming to life in that way, and I'm sure you're very much looking forward to seeing the film.
Very much looking forward to seeing what's produced, yes, and what comes off. And we hope it comes off well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. I'm talking to Jeremy Cowdrey, who's one of the producers. Jeremy, it's wonderful to have you here in Cornwall. What brought you to this particular spot, and how did you come to be involved in this film?
Well, there is many people who've read the novel Summer in February by Jonathan Smith. Came out in 1996. And I was one of many people who read it and just immediately thought it must be a film. And it was so visual. And for those of us who love Cornwall anyway and just got the feeling of the cliffs, the horizons, the skies, everything, added to the story of the famous artist back in 1912, it just had a very visual feel, the book. And I got hold of the author who I knew and talked to him about it. And there was a lot of interest then to be made into film, and nothing quite happened. And then it drifted, and then round about 2005, 2006, I started talking to him about it, and I bought the rights off him, and then bit by bit we've just brought it to fruition. And he's written an amazing screenplay. I mean, it's a beautiful screenplay, and here we are now. Very
exciting, and it's a true story, of course, of a love triangle based in Lamorna when it was the artist colony at the turn of the last century, with Alfred Munnings and Laura Knight and various people involved. Yeah. Who are you working with on this production?
I'm working with Cross Day Productions, who is two very brilliant producers, one Pippa Cross and Jeanette Day, and they've been around in the business for 25 years or so, and they used to head up Granada Films and made a succession of fantastic films. So they are really the sort of mechanics behind the production, whereas I picked it up a few years back and have sort of been nurturing it and bringing it along. And so the three of us have worked together, doing the money, the production, getting the artists together and bringing it, to where we are today. And
you've got some amazing young actors in the production as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, what we're really thrilled about is, so there it is, it's a story in 1912 featuring Alfred Munnings, who not everyone has heard of, and Laura Knight. And so it could have been a sort of middle England, middle class, middle film that isn't shown as widely as it deserved to be, because it's such a fantastic, dramatic story. So by having this incredible cast we've got, I think it'll bring the younger audience. So we've got, Dan Stevens, who's just been playing to sort of 12 million people a week in Downton as the main actor, as Matthew Crawley. And then we've got Dominic Cooper, who you'll know of the History Boys, Mamma Mia, An Education, A Week with Marilyn, Devil's Double. He was incredible in Devil's Double. And after this, he's going to lead in a Warner Brothers film in America, Motor City. So they've got, we've got a very current group of actors, and all the backup actors as well. I mean, we've got some absolutely fantastic actors. We've even got Ben Whitrow, who's a legendary actor, just doing it's almost like a cameo scene as a vicar at the wedding. But we've got some brilliant actors. Yeah, so it's really exciting.
It sounds a fantastic project. And how long are you planning to be here shooting?
Regrettably, not long enough. I mean, the whole shoot is 7 weeks, and we'll do about 4 weeks down in Cornwall, and then the 3 weeks dotted around other places, because there's a few London scenes, a sort of wedding and reception, and a few other little bits that we're doing in various other places. But I can tell you, we're pretty excited to be here, actually, because it just is a great resonance just being here, where we're pretty well 100 years on, and we're sort of replaying the story. And we were with the actors last night, and it was uncanny. The Hattie Morahan playing Laura Knight, chatting to Dominic Cooper, who's playing Munnings, and they were talking about their art, almost as though because they've done so much research themselves, that they're just fascinated by the art and everything. And there we were in the same pub, the exact same pub that Laura Knight and Harold Knight, her husband, and Munnings and all the others would have been in, talking about the same thing. It was uncanny, actually. Yeah.
Well, Lamorna's quite a spooky place sometimes. I wonder if it's going to stir up some ghosts while you're doing it, because Lamorna does have a reputation for being quite a dark and mysterious place. And certainly when you see the mist in the valley and the sunrise, it really does bring the story to life, doesn't it? It's called Summer in February, of course, because the spring comes early here.
When we were hiring the director, Christopher Manall, he was a little bit nervous about shooting in Cornwall in January, February. And, I did tell him about the microclimate. And sure enough, we've only been here a week. And it's just been beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. As for the sort of haunting aspect, I mean, I think it's very important that we are around Lamorna as much as we can, because I want the actors to really soak up the atmosphere. And there are some, it was a dark story, and they really need to get it under their skin, which is what I'm really pleased they are, actually. I mean, they're fascinated. They've got their Ordnance Survey maps out, so when they've got any time off, they're wandering on the cliffs, and they're doing exactly the same thing. This is a young group of artists here, in this case actors, reenacting what these young group of artists, as in painters, did 100 years ago, and they're all doing the same thing. It's really fantastic.
Well, it's great that that's happening. Has it been a very personal journey for you, getting this film off the ground?
Yeah, it has very much so. Become a very, very, very great friend with Jonathan Smith, the writer, who's just an absolute genius, but the most modest genius you could ever come across. It was actually my wife's. She was the one who really pushed it to happen, because she read the book again and again and again, and she eventually said, "Come on, let's get this sorted out." So, I mean, one of the reasons the project has taken so long is that she was unfortunately ill halfway through, and so for 2 years, and then she died, and so it's been a long thing, and then that's why I was so lucky that Pippa Cross and Jeanette Day came along, and they approached me and just said, "Let's help take this thing," because it needed some new legs to really, and real expert legs to get it, to where it is today. So yeah, you could call it a personal journey. Yeah,
very personal journey. Well, I'm so glad it's coming to fruition for you.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I better let you get off to your production office to keep going. Thank you so much.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sally. Thanks.
During the filming at Holywell Bay, I caught up with the writer of Summer in February, the man who wrote not just the novel, but also the screenplay of the film, Jonathan Smith. Jonathan, what inspired you to write the story of Summer in February in the first place?
Well, I met through a mutual friend, I met the son of one of the main characters, Gilbert Evans, and I met his son David, who lives in Sevenoaks, and he told me about this extraordinary series of events just before the First World War in Lamorna, and that his father was one of the sort of central players, as it were. And he allowed me to research the story, very personal, diaries, it's a love story, and I got absolutely hooked by it. It's a sort of story I love writing about, and I have written things not the same, but in the same kind of emotional territory, if you like. And so it just felt natural to me to do it, and so I spent a couple of years researching it, coming down to Cornwall, walking the lanes, walking the cliffs, taking photographs, talking to people, reading everything I could.
Was that when you walked around the house that was built for Gilbert Evans?
Absolutely, yes. I was walked around the outside of it in sort of slightly stalky way, and I went to the hotel and to Gilbert's house, and all around Carn barges and everywhere, just everywhere I could, until I kind of felt it really, until I was sort of imagined being this person or that person, or Florence or Gilbert or Munnings, and then I kind of after about 2 years of research, I kind of felt ready to go for it, to write, and then eventually you just have to reject the research and just go for it. Yeah.
It's a very evocative and haunting story. I know when we moved into the house, I read the book and I couldn't get it out of my head. And at the time I thought this would make a wonderful film. And then, of course, I found that a film was being planned. Did you ever dream it would be made into a film? And how much have you had to adapt it as well to make it into a film?
Well, from the moment the book came out in the mid-1990s, without being conceited, almost everybody who read it said to me, this is a great visual story. It would make a wonderful film. And I could see that. I mean, I didn't write it to make a film. I wrote it as a novel. But I could see that it was a very visual, and not only the setting, the Cornish setting, but also everything about the relationships was intensely visual. And then when we looked as if the film was going to happen, I was asked to write the screenplay, which is not a particularly easy thing to do. It's not particularly easy adapting your own work. Sometimes people like to get another writer in because you can be more ruthless. But I was very glad to do it, and I found it very enjoyable. I mean, it was different from writing for radio, writing from telly, so it was a new skill, really.
Is this the first film script you've written?
Yeah, it's the first main movie script. I mean, I've written lots of dramas for the BBC and some for television, but this is the first movie screenplay I've ever written. Yeah.
It's going to be very exciting to see it come to fruition. Have you found it difficult cutting certain bits out of the story, or do you feel you've managed to keep the essence of the book within the film?
Well, it's massively difficult cutting bits out. I mean, whole plot lines have to go, because a novel takes you 15, 20, 30 hours to read, and a film takes 100 minutes. So you just have to be very economical. You have to learn to tell the story partly visually, not just verbally. But on the other hand, I felt if I can keep the feel of it, if I can keep the emotional integrity of the story, if that doesn't sound pompous, I care for all the people in the story. I mean, I really care for Florence, for Gilbert, for AJ. I don't see any heroes or villains or good guys and bad guys. I can only write about people I care about, and I care about all three of them. And I want the viewer or the reader to do that. So at the end, you feel that life is very poignant and very difficult for all of us, and lots of emotional ups and downs. And this story just seems to encapsulate the kind of mystery of how we get into our relationships and how difficult life and moving life is.
Yes, well, it certainly does, because to me it just seemed to point to the fact that one should always express what you feel and not hold your feelings back, because the whole tragedy comes from that, really, doesn't it?
We are English, and one of our problems is that we tend to talk in subtext and not always to say exactly what we mean, which is why people from other cultures and other countries often find us extremely complex, because we often say something close to what we feel or not quite what we feel. I just think that's the truth, I'm afraid. I don't think the English are ever going to be different from that. Yes, I mean, maybe one should be more direct in one's emotional life, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. It certainly hasn't done with me anyway.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me, and I look forward very much to the film.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on in Cornwall for young people, and of course many people have heard of Jamie Oliver's famous 15 restaurant up in Wadebridge. Well, they run all sorts of courses there for local children to go and experience cooking, and I caught up with a group of kids from Lamorna when they were there, having a fantastic day learning to cook at 15. What are you trying there?
Lime.
Lime. What do you think of lime?
It's really sour.
What are you trying?
I just tried the lime, and now I'm trying the grapefruit again because, well, the lady said that if you try the lime and then you try the grapefruit is much sweeter.
Yeah.
And it's really nice.
Debbie, do you do these sort of demonstrations with children a lot at the moment?
Yeah, I've been doing them every week since I've started. I've only been here for about a month, so I've only done 3 so far. But yeah, it's really enjoyable.
What are they going off to do now?
They're going off to make some pasta. They're going to watch the chefs make some pasta, and they're going to watch a pasta machine in use, and then they're going to shape the dough themselves into some little exciting shapes.
So I'll show you a bit more than just pasta today, so you guys can go and maybe try and do some of the things for the people you cook for. Yeah? How old are you all?
6.
How old?
6 to about 15. Yes,
6 to 6. Ah, I said 6 to 6 then.
John, you arranged for the children to come here today. What are you hoping they're going to get out of it?
Well, the purpose of the exercise is really to learn more about food, learn about community cooking, learn about food hygiene, preparation, and just different types of food. The taster sessions we had at the start of the day were superb. All different types of local fruits and vegetables, just local tastes. I think it's a really brilliant day out and really happy for the kids because they look as though they're really enjoying it. But also the people here at 15, they've been inspiring, really. It's great fun.
Fantastic, isn't it? You were saying that you think these children seem to know more about the tastes than some of the adults with the different things that they were being given. Do you think that's a reflection on the diets they have at home?
Well, I can't say, but I know that at school they're learning about local foods, about cooking, and so they must learn all at school. Good for them.
Katya, what have you learnt to make today?
Pasta and...
You're the youngest one here today, aren't you? Have you got to taste something you've never tasted before?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
What was it?
I don't know what it's called, really. It was white and had this cream stuff inside.
George, what have you learnt to do today so far?
I've learned how to make a pasta, a certain type of pasta with a filling in it, but I can't make it, but I know how to make it.
What's it called?
Long, horrible name, which it's got something to do with half moon in Italian. You sort of put a filling in a circle and you fold it in half so it looks a bit like a pasty and a half moon, and then you fold it around in all sorts of shapes.
It's camely or something like that.
Have you learnt quite a lot so far, Emily?
Yes, a lot.
Have you made pasta before, George?
No, but I've seen my cooking teacher make it before, though.
What are you making in there?
This is the lamb that's going to go in the ragu. I think you may have shown you the ragu before. This is the sauce base, the tomato sauce. What we do is we break this down just finely through the ragu and cook it off for about 40 minutes, and you put that on again through your pasta. It's just obviously really slowly braise the lamb, obviously, so it all just basically falls straight off the bone.
Well, it looks delicious. How long have you been working here, and what's your name?
My name's Paul. I'm one of the trainees, and I've only got 5 months left. I've been working here about 6-7 months now. Apart from that, obviously before that, I was at college with 15 as well, for 5 months before that. Training obviously to get into the kitchen.
Have you enjoyed your time here?
Yeah, of course I have, yeah. I've always wanted to learn how to cook, so, well, I've always cooked, but obviously not to this sort of standard, so it's good to, learn new stuff, and I definitely enjoy my time here.
Thank you. Ben, what have you thought of your time here at 15 this morning? What have you learnt to cook?
Well, we did some pasta making, which was pretty good, and it was pretty good fun. Tried some new foods and stuff.
Can you see yourself doing lots of food for the people at home now, and lots of community lunches and things?
Yeah, that'd be pretty fun actually. Use all the stuff we've learnt today to cook for people. Would be quite good fun, I reckon. Yeah. Should be good.
Is there anything you've tasted today that you've never tasted before?
Yeah, the green gauges, whatever they were pretty good. Pretty nice. Bit sour, but still pretty good.
Going for a surf now?
I wish. It looks pretty nice.
John, there's quite a special reason why the children have come today to 15, isn't there?
Well, yes, the original idea was for the children to not only cook for the community, but also to raise money for charity. And it was a Blue Peter appeal. They were particularly interested at the time, and they want to continue that.
What was your favourite thing about the morning, Owen?
Probably the bit when we maybe got to eat the lunch, or the cooking bit when we got to do the pasta, or the food tasting. Probably all of it I like. Probably the food tasting actually.
On that note of appreciation for the food, we go to one of Penwith Radio's youngest presenters to talk about another very important side of Cornwall.
This is Juliet Peterson, reporting for Penwith Radio. Surfing is a lifestyle here in Cornwall, and I've been speaking to a few people who are largely involved in the surfing culture at Sennen. I'm talking to Dave Muir, who is the head of Sennen Surfing Centre. How long has Sennen Surf School been going?
So the surf school itself has been going since kind of the mid-60s, when Skewjack was going on and Pete Urquhart was in charge of the school. So I don't know the exact date, but it was kind of from the Skewjack period. But I took it over about 11 years ago now. So today, I think this summer is our 10th year of actually running it. But yeah, so for me and the way it is at the minute, we've been running it for 10 years.
And have you noticed an increased interest in surfing in recent years? Has it become more trendy, or?
Yeah, surfing's been far more popular probably in the last 6 or 7 years. We called it the Blue Crush effect, I think in 2005 when the film came out and everybody, or especially girls, took up surfing. And that year was probably one of our busiest years. And since then, surfing's just become more popular. And we've taught an increase in numbers year after year.
Can young people make a career out of surfing?
Yeah, I think young people and surfing kind of go hand in hand. And I think if anyone can make a career in surfing, it'll be kind of teenagers up to kind of the age of about 24, 25. At that stage, if they haven't made a career in surfing, I think it's quite difficult. But as far as career in surfing professionally, in Cornwall it's been difficult, but just recently more and more people have been making a go of it and proving it can happen. And then I suppose I'm an example of someone who was young. I was only 19 when I took over the school, and I've not looked back. That's a career now kind of forged for me until I decide not to jump in a wetsuit and teach surfing.
So at what age did you become interested in surfing yourself, start surfing?
I suppose it was about 16 or 17, because I moved to Cornwall when I was about that age, and up until that point I was more involved in cricket and rugby and football and other sports, and surfing was more of a dream. But when it happened, when I moved to Cornwall, surfing became more of a lifestyle than anything else, and then when I started coaching at about 18, then it became a career as well. So surfing probably from about 16 or 17 has become a big part of my life.
You took the next question right out of my mouth. The next question was going to be, do you see surfing as a lifestyle? So I guess you just answered that. What does surfing mean to you?
Surfing means two things. For me, it's a bit of a release. It's a way of kind of, getting rid of some energy, some angst, and just jumping in the water and enjoying being in the ocean, which I suppose sounds a bit hippie, but it's definitely kind of the most important thing. But it's also meant a way of life, a way of living, and a way of keeping myself afloat, because the surf school's been, not just a job, but a career for years to come. So surfing is like kind of double meaning for me. I love it because it's a sport, it's a hobby, but at the same time it's my job. So it kind of has taken over my life in many ways.
And what is it that you think makes Sennen Surfing Centre an award-winning school?
I don't know. I think our enthusiasm and our passion for surfing is really important. I'm going to put it down to my team rather than me for making surfing kind of, the surf school so popular. But we love it. Our coaches, from our young coaches who are coming through the ranks to myself and the guys who have left, have just loved every moment of being in Sennen, being on this beach and being part of our unit. I think we're really lucky to have a really close team, and year after year I'm kind of having to bat away potential employees rather than kind of advertise for new employees. So we're really, really lucky. We've got a great team. Sennen Cove itself and the waves that Sennen make it, amazing. But just generally our enthusiasm, our passion for it, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. We enjoy what we do. I suppose that's probably why we're an award-winning school.
How can young people get involved and become surf instructors?
I think probably just firstly being when they're super young, surfing as much as they can, improving their ability. Hanging around surf schools I think has helped. A lot of our coaches who have just become coaches now have been part of the school since they were really young, so they know what to expect. They've part of the scene a little bit, and they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. But at the same time, obviously there's qualifications that are needed. So from a lifeguard qualification to a surf instruction qualification, which are easily available now. But I'd say kind of just look at schools, being part of the school, volunteer, get your kind of face in there, and surf schools are becoming more and more popular around the world. So there's chances of doing work in Cornwall and then kind of working abroad in the winters. And it is, it's not kind of a taboo thing to do anymore. Being a surf coach is definitely a way of life and a career choice. So just be involved in schools, pick up those qualifications when you turn 17 or 18, and then just throw everything into it. I think that's the best way.
Thank you for talking to me, and have a great day.
Thank you.
I'm talking to Maisie, who is a surf instructor at Sennen Surfing Centre. How long have you been surfing, Maisie?
Since I was about 7. My dad taught me how to surf first, and then I came here when I was a bit later, so my friends did it at the centre, so it helped me improve.
Do you think there is an imbalance of female and male surfers?
Unfortunately, honestly, yeah, probably is. Although the last few years there have been a few more younger surfers coming up, which is really good to see, who are female. But I mean, they surf just as well as the boys when they're in there. But I think hopefully over the last few years it has been publicised a bit more, so female surfers are increasing, which is good.
And how does it feel knowing that you are helping people from all over the country, or maybe even the world if they're on holiday, learn how to surf?
It's really good. You get to meet lots of people as well, so it's really nice to meet them. You get a good boost as well when you teach people to surf. It's really enjoyable, especially younger ones, getting them involved in a new sport.
I'm talking to Eddie, who is a lifeguard at Sennen Beach. Why are lifeguards so important, especially on a surfing beach?
Well, a lot of the public who come down from up country have never really been down here, and they're not very beach aware, and obviously most aren't confident in the sea. So even when conditions look fairly safe to locals, a lot of holiday makers tend to get themselves into trouble. So we have zoning our flags. We have the red and yellow flags, which is what we feel is the safest area on the beach. So that's for swimming and bodyboarding. And then we designate an area of black and white flags for all the surfers, just so we can keep people in spots and we can keep an eye on them.
Why do you separate the surfers, the swimmers and the bodyboarders?
Well, unexperienced surfer on a surfboard can do a lot of damage, because obviously surfboards are quite hard, whereas bodyboards are quite soft, and so we put the bodyboarders and swimmers, as they're the most high risk users of the beach, in the safest area of the beach.
And how can people maximise their safety in the evenings or on a non-lifeguarded beach?
Well, it depends on the experience of the beach users. Obviously the locals use the beach in the evenings all year round, so basically the message is, if you have young kids or you're inexperienced, just stay well within your depth and keep a good eye on them.
How did you get into lifeguarding?
I grew up here surfing, and obviously it's one of the best jobs to be down here in the summer and working on the beach. We have a good lifeguard team. We're all locals. We all get on with each other, and it's basically the best job around.
And last of all, how can other people get into lifeguarding like you did?
Well, I'd recommend that you obviously are already confident in the sea. Most of the lifeguards are experienced surfers, so they've grown up on the beach and in beach conditions. Also, if you're fit, pass the fitness tests, and you've got to be keen really, because you're down the beach 8 hours a day. So, yeah.
Thank you for talking to me. This is Juliet Peterson, reporting for Penwith Radio.
Food foraging is another thing that has become very popular in Cornwall in the last few years. Rachel Lambert, one of the first people to get involved in foraging for food and putting on wild food walks, came into the studio to talk about her work. I've heard a lot about your wild food walks, and I haven't been on one yet. I was going to come on one, but it rained and I didn't come, so I was a bit of a coward. But do you go out in all weathers to do these wild food walks?
We do. There's always a chance that the weather might be horrendous and too bad to walk in, but I've never had to cancel a walk yet. And often we get really good weather, actually, and we have a little gap in the day where it's good enough to walk, so it's good timing sometimes.
What made you start doing these wild food walks? Because it is a wonderful idea to go and pick your own food.
It's great, and I just thought, oh, this is fantastic. It's something that I enjoy doing, and my knowledge has built up over a long, long time, for about 15 years. And I love walking, I love good food, and picking food is just a great sort of addition to that. And I got to the point where I just felt that I knew enough about wild food to start teaching. And I started teaching on a very small scale, and quite organically the business has just grown to what it is now.
And you've been doing it in West Cornwall for how long?
West Cornwall, I've been doing it down here, I think, since November, December time. Yeah.
And do you find that there's a lot of take-up for your different events?
Yes, it's been going down really well. A mixture of local people as well as holiday makers, and also businesses interested as well, so it's been fantastic.
One thing I have wondered about is if we all start going on wild food walks and we all start picking our food, what's going to happen to the hedgerows and what's going to happen to the ecology of the area? Are there restrictions on what you are allowed to pick?
There are some restrictions, but they're really, really basic. So on a legal level, we're not allowed to dig up roots. Also, on sites of specific scientific interest, you're not allowed to pick as well. Mm-hmm. And some of the sites that I use are Triple SI, which is a site of specific scientific interest. So those sites we just use as a teaching ground. And then there's guidelines that I give to people to only pick where there's an abundance of a plant. Don't pick a plant that's rare. And you can pick up to, say, 30% of a plant. And go for the ones that are really common. There's lots of really common, people often call them invasive weeds, that are really tasty, really edible and really nutritious. So if we focus on those, I think working with nature in that way and with the environment, being aware of where we pick, how much we pick, is really important and essential when I teach as well.
Is fat hen one of those weeds?
Fat hen is one of those.
It's really tasty. I tasted it for the first time recently.
Yes, it's great.
It's very good in a salad, isn't it?
I've used it mostly cooking, actually, as a spinach. And, it's a great sort of melt-in-the-mouth texture. And,
Could you tell me some of the main things that you find in this area?
Gosh, I mean, it will really vary depending on the time of year. And any one walk, I usually cover about 10 plants. And in a walk, I could do that walk over again and again and do 10 different plants. Some of the common ones in this area have got lots of sorrel. Around the coastal areas, there's sea beet, which is often known as sea spinach. There's quite a lot of tree mallow. There's lots of nettles, quite a lot of yarrow. The list goes on. I'm trying to think what we covered yesterday. We were at Prosher Cove yesterday.
The nettles you can only really pick in early spring, can't you? Because we always make nettle soup, but we tend to do it early summer, late spring, early summer.
Spring is the best time because the plants really had a chance to rest over winter, and then spring comes and all the goodness is drawn up through those roots. So that's the best time.
So at this time of year, nettle soup might be a bit stringy, or
not? Well, what's happening if nettles have been strinned back, and a lot of the pathways they have, you're getting the new growth that's coming up. So now, at sort of now and beginning of autumn, and obviously autumn starting to come a little earlier, then you can still get a lot of fresh nettles, and I've been picking a bit recently again.
Oh, good. And what is tree mallow?
Tree mallow is a coastal plant. There's a common mallow and tree mallow. It's got sometimes you see cabbages which have got a really, really woody, almost like tree-like stem. So it's got one of those stems, and it's a leafy green. You use the greens. It's a very dowdy, soft dowdy leaf. Almost, when I'm working with children, I say it's like rabbit's ears. It's really lovely and soft. And it's got a very melt-in-the-mouth taste as well, and it's kind of quite a safe taste for people who are kind of getting newly into wild food.
Is that something you would steam?
You can steam it, you can add it into soups or stews. It's similar to a plant that's from Arabian countries called Melokia, and there they make it into a sort of brothy light soup. It's got a glutinous quality to it, but in a nice sort of gentle way. So
Sounds interesting. And then you do these amazing potager events, which sound fantastic, where people go and pick their own food and then cook a gourmet meal. Do they actually cook the meal entirely from what they've picked?
No, we do mix some other things in. I mean, we have dishes which may include sort of fromage frais or rice or pasta. But the idea with these walks is the potager is a beautiful venue, and it's organic garden, and we just use what we pick from that site. So we're picking in the wild areas, so picking the so-called weeds, and also some of the organic produce, and that will make up the majority of the meal, mixed in with other things so we're not just having a vegetable-based meal.
And
it's a 3-course meal. It's really, really lovely and such a special place.
Well, that does sound a wonderful thing to do. You went to Dartington Art College.
Yes.
You studied at Dartington Art College and you practiced dance and physical theatre. So how did you move from dance and physical theatre into all your nature work?
Well, if you've ever been to Dartington, it's the most amazing venue. It's, if you're into nature, it's just beautiful. And actually, it's about a 2-mile walk from town into the college. And I used to walk down the drive from the college, and on the left-hand side, there used to be so many ramsons, wild garlic. You used to be able to pick those, and there'd be such a strong smell. So actually, that time in my life was when I started getting into wild food.
Was it? So what happened with the dance? Are you still involved
I still do dance, yes. I still teach movement and body awareness, run workshops with that, and have done quite a lot of work with older people as well, which is fantastic. So the two loves for me, really, in terms of working with people and the body, as well as leading walks in nature.
And you do those in West Cornwall as well?
Yes, actually, I've done them all over Cornwall. Yep, I'm not sure on the next. We're hoping to do some work in a community hospital again down here, but we'll see.
Oh, that's wonderful. And when you do take when you take families out on the walks, do you find it really seems to inspire the children to give them a new awareness of what's around them?
Children are great to have on the walks because they really see things differently, and they're often, we often end up looking at insects and other things as well. And to do it as a family is great. Often you hear parents who think, I can't get my children to eat vegetables or green things. The emphasis of the walk isn't on that, but when kids are there and it's like, I can pick this and nibble it, it becomes more fun. So it goes down really well with children, and they're a wonderful addition to walks.
I suppose it could mean that people, when they're weeding their gardens, could actually find a use for the weeds and things too.
Absolutely.
You may be very bad at growing vegetables, but you may actually be growing more than you realise in your garden that you can actually eat.
Absolutely. And I hear that again and again. It's like, don't tell me that's edible as well. I've been digging that one up for years. And it's the case, it's kind of a lazy gardener's way to guide to food, really.
Do you actually work with medicinal herbs and plants too?
I teach people about some of the medicinal uses of plants. I'm not a medical herbalist, but I know a fair amount about those medicinal uses, and there's some home uses that are quite easy to take on.
And are there some of those herbs just around us all the time that we could use for healing purposes?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yarrow is a really common one, and it's mostly known for being very good for severe colds. And we always think that there's no kind of cure for a cold, but yarrow can be really helpful.
Really? Made into a tea?
Yeah, you can have it as a tea. I've often got a stash at home that I've dried through the summer that often kind of keeps me going through the winter.
Well, if you're interested in going on one of Rachel's walks, you can get in touch with her through www.wildwalks-southwest.co.uk. That's wildwalks-southwest.co.uk. Thank you very much for talking to us, Rachel. Is there any subject that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
I don't think so, no.
Any particular passion that you have in connection with the work you do that I haven't mentioned?
I'll just say, I think it's one thing knowing about wild food, but it's another thing also teaching, and it's just a great opportunity for me to be leading walks, and I really like that group setting where we're learning and walking together. And
the walk, and I just have such a range of ages as well. From, I think the youngest has been 6 months and the eldest has been a couple in their 90s. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah, it does really appeal to lots of ages.
Yes, I think it's wonderful work you're doing, and thank you very much for coming in. I'm Sally Peterson, and you've been listening to Penwith Radio.
That's all for this edition of Lasting Memories, part of the All Our Stories project in association with the Heritage Lottery Fund,